basically like my batteries included, very opinionated starter kit that is used for, it's great for AI coding.
Cool.
I went through every one of these tools. AI knows inside and out. It's not like hallucinating.
So this
random
is something
things.
you could shove into like cursor rules or something like that.
Yeah.
How is it changing the working relationship between the humans? I'm curious about that. After talking to Kevin, I was able to put some of his techniques to use. And I have to say, I'm giving a lot more over to the AI now than I was a week ago. You know, I've tried vibe coding and things go off the rails. What Kevin has given me is a set of concrete tools and techniques that he's honed that just simply work. We go through all of those in the video, but I want to tell you, like, he works at an incubator, Pioneer Square Labs. And while he's been there, they've spun out over 40 companies. And that means they've done a lot more than that in terms of prototyping, because at an incubator, you're going to discard an order of magnitude more ideas as you go. So they've really not just used Gen AI in the products they're spinning out, but in the entire development workflow that they use to create the companies, from BRD to PRD to code, not just code. Is he's really thought through the whole process of from ideation to writing code, to using the latest models to do design iterations and architecture diagrams and to vet product requirements, the whole thing. We go through all that in this video. It was really useful. I hope you're going to love it. And I honestly think that he's doing it best in class and you're going to learn a lot. So this is a great conversation. We cover a lot more than that. I can't wait to share it with you. Hello, AI Tinkerers, and welcome to One Shot. This is our global stage where we talk to people in the community who are doing interesting things somewhere on the forefront of generative AI. And today I'm thrilled to be here with Kevin Leneway, a multi-time presenter at AI Tinkerers meetups over the years, a longtime member as well, and someone from the startup community in Seattle that I've known for 15 plus years. And who's worked, we've never worked directly together, but I've worked with many people that you've worked with very intimately. So it's a very cool to sit down and have this conversation with you. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of AI Tinkerers. I mean, I love the Seattle startup community, but I felt like kind of got tired of events after a while. And then it wasn't until AI Tinkerers came along that I was like, oh my gosh, an event that's like actually fun to go to. And the people are all amazing. And I'm learning stuff. Like it's cool. So good. So I really
That's great feedback. That's great feedback. Thank you. Yeah. I stopped going to events long ago. And if we're going to do an event, it should be one that we want to go to and get value. So I'm glad that you enjoy that. One of the things that's bubbled up through not just the community, but I think more from your YouTube videos has been this really interesting way of product development that you've discovered. I think you're very intuitive. You're a tinkerer.
Yes.
Very intuitive. You're tinkering, you're playing, you're seeing what works, you're experimenting very rapidly. And I want to have you show that off to people and to me and to walk us through the thing. Maybe we could build something together. That'd be cool. But maybe for people who don't know you, just a little bit about your background and what you've been doing.
So I work at Pioneer Square Labs. So that's a startup studio here in Seattle. I've been there about 7 years as a principal software engineer. And generally my job is like, I'm a kind of like a temporary early stage CTO. So an entrepreneur comes in, we help to validate that idea. I'll generally build the first version, help to hire the technical team and then move on. And so love working there. It's been super fun. And as part of that, you know, we've been really into AI. We've been into AI for a while, but especially as LLMs have come about, not only are we using it for some of our new startups, but we've been using it as part of our workflow, you know, to create new companies. So it's perfect for this
rapid prototyping and
prototyping, and the fact that we're doing it over and over again, so we can invest in some tools and tips, and we're all sharing ideas. So
just to give people a sense of like, because I know how fast they iterate at Pioneer Square Labs. How many companies have you actually spun out while you've been there for 7 years?
Yeah, so I think we've spun out close to 40 companies overall at PSL. I personally worked on about 8 or 9. And
how many ideas have you prototyped? And because you discard a lot. Right? Yes. They don't make it all the way through the validation, right?
Yeah, we generally say about maybe 9 out of every 10 ideas we toss. And so, and oftentimes we try to validate ideas before we actually write any code. And so by the time I come along and start writing code, usually the idea has been validated. That being said, nowadays it's so much faster and easier to write code that recently, it's almost like we've been building prototypes instead of Figma, you know, what we used to do with design. in a day or two, we can throw together something that's just like kind of working and good enough that it's like, let's start to test it. And so that's a really useful part of that workflow, actually. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's been in the methodology for a long time to do the fake landing page test.
Yes, exactly.
Now you could do the fake entire working product test in a way.
Right.
Like at least, I mean, it might not be scalable, it might not have the bells and whistles, but it could do end to end. Any of these tools can do something pretty magical in a very short period of time relative to just a year ago or 2 years ago.
Exactly.
So that's exciting. So, okay, you have this really interesting workflow. I think that, I don't know, you said something like Figma's dead or something, right? Can you just take us through that headline and then what is the workflow?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I think Figma's not dead. I love Figma. It was a question and the answer was no.
The answer was no? Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's, but I do think there are a lot of techniques you can use. I've seen people use AI for coding, quick prototypes. A lot of them kind of look the same. A lot of mine kind of look the same, to be honest. And often that doesn't matter. But there are workflows you can use for design. There's workflows you can use for testing, debugging, all sorts of different things. And, again, my day job requires me to just tinker around and find interesting ways that are repeatable. And so between myself and some of my colleagues, we've come up with a bunch of different techniques and tips. And honestly, the other day, I was just sitting around and I was showing something in our team meeting. One of my colleagues was like, "Hey, how did you do that?" And I was like, "I'll just make a video." And so I made a video, put it on YouTube because it was too big to send. And I shared it with them. And then I shared it with a couple other people. And next thing I knew, like people were like, "Oh, this is really interesting." And to me, it's like, "Oh, I do this every day. Isn't that interesting?" But I was like, "Oh, other people might find some of these other things." So that's kind of started sharing stuff on YouTube. And that's been really fun.
That's really cool. We'll link to it in the description of the comments. Well, okay. So I think I would guess that most people got introduced, developers, they're coding and they got introduced because they're at their IDE and they put Copilot in and now we're doing basically fancy completions and maybe longer stuff. And then Cursor, I think it took a while for people to find the second tab that's more like agentic. Yes. You remember it was defaulting to like the chat and
I was like, okay,
a little bit of completion of the chat. What's the big deal? Yeah. And then, agentic, but what you're talking about, I think you're backing up out of the process a little bit. Yeah. You're talking about all the way from conception to like PRD to design to prototyping. Is that how you should think about it? What are those distinct components? Like just to orient people where we're then going to dive in.
Yeah. So the way that I like to do things is I will start off with, and assuming this is a 0 to 1 brand new product from scratch.
Okay.
Start off just spending a lot of time up front describing the thing I want to build. I might spend like an hour in notes, like just building out very detailed, exactly the thing.
You're doing that on your own or you're having a conversation with an AI?
It's usually on my own, or even like often what I've been doing is I'll sit down with someone from my team on the product side. We'll have a conversation. I'll record that and then I'll summarize that. And tweak from there. But, it's really, I spend a ton of time up front, just like really defining exactly the thing that I want.
And then you're getting what's the next stage?
Yeah. So then from there, basically, I have a series of prompts that I've been perfecting and just kind of, sharing with the community. And basically the first one is going through and creating a business requirement stock. Not that I need a business requirement stock, like nobody actually reads those things. But what's nice about it is if you use one of those, the frontier thinking models. So I use O1 Pro, O3 Mini's good. And instead of just saying, "Hey, give me a BRD," you actually say, "Give me a BRD," but actually think through these like 10 random BRD frameworks or analysis things that like smart.
What are some examples like that? Like,
I don't even know what they are. They are like, and I can share an example.
Would they be things like what are the moats in this business idea or whatever?
Yeah. Or more like use the Jacobson process to break down the moats for this. All these like very technical things that basically.
And you have a library of those now that you actually use. Okay. So
it's just like do 4 or 5 of these. And the whole point of that is just do a bunch of thinking up front. Get it to think as much as possible and then output a BRD that, tends to be higher quality than what he would get if you just said, "Hey, come you." So then I take that.
And no one reads that, but the AI reads that.
Yeah, no, nobody reads. I mean, I glance through it. I make sure it's like directionally correct. It's always, the new models are so good. You're going to get something very solid.
Okay.
And it's very, very detailed.
Yep.
And then I basically take those business requirements, do the exact same thing with the product requirement.
Okay.
And so from there again, random buzzwords. It does a bunch of stuff.
Mhm.
You get a thing that's actually quite good. And then from there, my next step, and this is sort of the key to making the whole thing work,
Okay.
is I say, okay, take this BRD, and I have a very kind of a magic word is make a Markdown checklist of stories with one story point tasks. And basically what that does is it gives you, basically rails for the AI to follow.
Okay.
And so you're able to do enough work that you're not constantly having to restart it, but it's not so much work that it just kind of goes off on its own and starts doing random.
These stories for the AI to work on, you mean to actually start building code?
Start building code.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we see a BRD, PRD in one of these
Yeah.
checklists?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, let's see, I can pull
And I've got your screen on.
Great. Look at my ChatGPT history. Hopefully there's nothing too embarrassing in here.
Crop that up.
Let's see here. So here's kind of my, here's my prompts that I generally use.
Okay.
And so, basically I said, hey, let's start off, create an enhanced prompt for my PRDs and BRDs. Here's
Okay.
how I did this. And here's kind of an example of one like around Microsoft.
Blue Ocean Strategy Canvas. Porter's 5 courses. Wow. Okay.
Do stuff like that. And
That's cool.
So here's my prompts that I use. So you're a senior product manager. You put your specs here.
I'm curious just on the Porter's 5 forces of these kind of big ideas, right? Have you gone from product folks discussing something to this framework and significantly changed a product outcome or a company that you're spinning?
It's a good, so
become more ambitious or some direction change.
We haven't done that explicitly for this, but one thing we have been experimenting with at PSL was kind of my over the break project was an internal tool to start to use some rubrics and things like this to evaluate startup ideas and start to break them down and match. Hey, here's an entrepreneur we want to work with. Let's suggest 5 ideas that might be really
cool. Interesting.
And not just like, hey, AI suggests an idea, but break it down into this like super long detailed thing.
So you're kind of building companies for the entrepreneurs that are part of that ecosystem.
And it's, it's not like they're going to take it off the shelf and just run with it, but it's just starting.
Yeah,
it's
that's
a conversation to have with them and just kind of.
All right. So you go from that to, and it looks, the output is something like, or you have the checklist already.
Yep. No. So this is basically just the prompt that I use. And then this gives you a BRD. And then here's kind of the PRD prompt.
Do you have GitHub for these? Or this public? Is this something you can share?
So I actually do. If you go to, let's see here. Here it is. So I've got this. This is my next AI starter. So this is basically like my batteries included, very opinionated starter kit that is used for. It's great for AI coding.
Cool.
I went through every one of these tools. I know it's inside and out. It's not like hallucinating.
So this is something you could shove into like cursor rules or something like that.
Yes. And
some of these bits and pieces.
Yep. And even for this, so I have very detailed cursor rules that are already set up here.
Right on.
And so this goes through every single one of these tools and gives like
fantastic
pieces here.
Cool.
And then the README, I believe I have some of these prompts in the README somewhere.
Okay.
Maybe not here. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so I've got my template. So this template basically has some of those things I use.
And I saw some stuff in there, Vercel and whatever. So we're going to get into we're going to go down this path. It seems like we're going to instantiate apps by the end of it. Okay. So sorry I keep derailing. Got BRD, you got PRD, you got prompts that help you generate both of those. And then what?
So we go through that and then, and then at the very end, basically create that checklist. So.
And show me what the checklist looks like.
Yeah, so let's see. I change. Do we have this? Oh, here's my detailed markdown checklist. Let me see if I have one. Got my sorry, I don't have this here. Actually, let me show you. Here's an example checklist here. Okay, so it's let me actually get the code.
Cool.
So basically it looks something like this. So you'll have, your starting point, initialize the project. Here's some routing. Now do the home page. There's a greeting page. So
it's sort of building the app either page by page or layer by layer somehow at a level that basically a competent developer would take it as a work assignment, basically level.
Yeah, exactly.
Very prescriptive.
Yeah. And I found that by saying, one story point story. Like it's kind of arbitrary, but that does seem to be something that kind of fits in that magic spot of like, it's about 20 to 25 messages back and forth with Cursor, which is kind of where the limit, where it'll stop you.
Okay.
You start to do like 50, it loses the context window, gets all funky, and it's
sure.
And so generally I'll go through and, one of these stories will be, about 25 messages.
You wonder how much of the RLHF that's behind the scenes was sort of expecting that. And that's why it works.
Right.
It's like, that's the normal unit of work.
It's, you think about it, it's trained on a ton of GitHub.
Yeah, exactly.
Got a bunch of, stories and things
Don't
like
fight
that,
the nature.
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
Okay.
Yep. So this is kind of a
right on. Okay, cool. And then, so when you're taking a story point and this checklist, one of these is a check, it's one item with some bullets, right? Is a story point.
Yep.
And when you're feeding that, where are you feeding that? What's the next? Is that copy and paste into Cursor?
Yes. Yep. So I can I'll pull up Cursor and let me show you. I can just show an example. This is something I've been working on today. But I will pull up a little bit of my history here. But yeah, so here is an example. So I have this checklist that I created. So this is a project I've been working on with my video series, which is kind of a step-by-step kind of showing people how to create an AI coding agent. So like we're creating Cursor, right? It's basically behind the scenes, just showing people how to do tool calls, how to do some of this stuff. And so as part of this, I created, I have my docs folder here, and here's my checklist.
Cool. So interesting. Yeah. The product, I was going to ask, like, it seems natural that you would feed these to some kind of engine, and that's what you're building in your video series.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And so this one's already been checked off, but basically.
Oh, and actually is editing the Markdown to make progress?
Yeah.
To track progress? Oh, that's funny.
Let's see if I can, I'll tell you what, I've got.
Hilarious.
Let me try to see if it'll kick this off.
Oh, funny.
Okay. And so it basically just says.
Is the engine, this engine is open source as well? We can play
the engine is, yep. It's on my GitHub.
Okay.
But yeah, basically, it's very, very straightforward. Yeah. Go through each story, find the next story to work on, review each unfinished task, and just go do it. Oh, sure. Why not?
But if I wasn't using your engine, I could literally just copy the story.
Oh yeah. In this case, I'm building the engine, but I use Cursor for this all the time. And I mean, Cursor is a fantastic tool.
Okay.
And so basically what it's doing is.
Are you all Claude 3.7 for everything?
I've been using Claude 3.7 thinking. I go back and forth a little bit because it can get a little ambitious, especially. I actually find it works really well with this kind of structured approach because it will follow step by step and then stop when you want it to.
Define ambitious when you use it in that context.
Well, for example, I was working on something earlier today where I had a bug and I was trying to get a language server. So basically I could do some linting with my coding agent. And if there's a linting error, it would. Yeah. And so I had a language server built in there and it was a pretty simple implementation and it had a little bug. And I said, hey, give me some ideas of like where I can fix this bug. And I was like, well, I got some ideas. Actually, let me just rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah, just rip it out and do something over. Yeah.
Giant library. I'm like,
sure.
Come on.
Yeah.
And looking at it, I'm like, maybe this is better.
Sometimes we appreciate that. Sometimes that's magic.
It was too much. That's the kind of thing where like, sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's too much. Okay. But I'll tend to kind of go back to 3.5. 3.5 is just such a solid.
Got it. Oh, interesting. Wow.
So good. Okay. I would say 90% of the time right now, I'm working off this checklist thing, and then I'm just having it kind of go through and do things. Okay. It's probably going to like, it's trying to like rewrite code that it's already, code's already there.
But in your methodology, you've gone BRD, PRD, work items. Now you're coding, but didn't we skip like the design? We talked about Figma. Like what about prototyping a UI?
Yep.
We're thinking that through.
So there's a couple things. So one thing, so I haven't done it with this since it's a CLI tool. But one thing that I like to do is use a tool called Storybook. So Storybook, if you haven't heard of it, basically a front end. It's been around for a while, the source project. It allows you to kind of view your components, React components individually, and it's used for visual testing. I tend to use it for, this was sort of back in the days before you had the sort of hot reload built into your Next or whatever it is. And instead of compiling something, it had a hot reload at one of the first ones. So you could just kind of see your components in real time. It allows you to do kind of stories and kind of see how things might work. So you might have a button that's disabled, and then a small button and a big button, and that sort of thing.
For your components, or do they have a component library?
For your components.
Okay.
And so what's really nice about that is you can write a prompt that basically says, build out Storybook stories for this product. So we get all the way to the PRD part, and we say, instead of building the whole thing, just build the front.
Yeah.
And the magic words I use there is use atomic design, which basically, I honestly didn't know this, but it basically means start with your basic components at a very low level, and then start to put those together into, more complete sections and get all the way to a page. And so we'll kind of break it down into like about 2 or 3 levels.
Wow.
And that works really well because the AI can go through and start to build out these small components, start to build out all the things together. And what's really nice is you don't get tangled up in where I've seen problems with AI coding is you build the front end, you build the API, you go get the database, and now you want to change things.
Sure.
The API is going to be a little bit off. Do a migration for your database. And it's annoying. And it's like, well, let's just start out with the front end, just get everything just the way you wanted. And I've actually found at PSL, oftentimes just having that where you can click through this prototype and show people, it's good enough to get a sense of like, oh yeah, this is good. Or you know what, this is totally off base. Let's toss it and start over.
I've had good luck with Claude 3.7, just having it going from sort of PRD with no necessarily opinions on the UI.
Yeah.
But then saying, I'll paste in BRD and PRD kind of level stuff. Yeah. And then I'll say, I need a UI for this. And here's some preferences I have. Yeah. And then I really want to be focused on the next action or a central thing, or I want more of a dashboard style. I'll give it some guidance, and then I'll use Cloud Artifacts. I'll just say, mock it up.
Yes.
And it'll do a good job. And then I'll iterate with that. How does that compare to using Storyboard, that level of design iteration, I guess?
I think it's very similar. And I think you can kind of work, they kind of work hand in hand.
Okay.
The nice thing about Storybook is you kind of have the context because it creates these stories, which are sort of these visual testing artifacts. It gives the AI a lot of context about what that component is actually doing.
They're doing interaction
and things like that.
Okay.
And it'll often give like mocking up data that goes into a component. So that way the component sort of know, when I build up my API, it just has a lot of information about what that thing is supposed to do. And
so when you go from PRD to Storybook components that are loaded in with state, are you like copying and pasting in, or how does that actually work? How that step work?
So basically, I'll just copy paste in the checklist of things to do, and then it just builds that front end.
Storybook will do that in its tool. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the AI will build stories, and then Storybook will just render everything.
Oh, can you show us? Can we just do one?
Yeah. So let me see if I can find. All right. So it took me a sec, but so here's an example of Storybook. So this is a project that I was working on at PSL about 2 months ago. Basically needed a fake privacy impact assessment form to test out this AI agent that we were working on.
Okay.
And so it's one of those where it's going to take 2 weeks to like get access to this tool that I needed. And instead I was like, well, let me just make my own and do it in like an hour or two and do that. And so the way that I did this, and this is all using Storybook. So your Storybook here is we kind of broke it down into, these smaller components. And so, and these are very small. So this is like a little accordion kind of thing. And you have these stories that kind of have these different states. So here it is when it's closed. Here it is when it's opened. Buttons, this is kind of your standard thing that you'll see, which is, you got a next and back and disabled and secondary. Your drop downs of, different things with when it's disabled or if you have different things selected.
Okay.
So you can just kind of test stuff out. And these tend to be fairly small. And then they start to build up a little bit bigger where it's like, okay, here's a panel where it's like a search box and some of these drop downs. And the width is you can kind of see that.
But how did you get to all these implemented to these requirements?
Yeah. So the way I did this is I had my cursor tasks here. And basically I gave it, let's see here. I think I have this here. So this is my second. So I had a previous one where I was actually creating stories. And so basically I said, use atomic design, and based on all this information, give me all the individual components, and then give me the, sections, and then give me the full pages. I just went through and I just check. Did all that stuff.
And then at that point you could look at it and say, no, it's too complex, simplify it or combine some concepts. Or you could iterate.
Yep. Okay. And then it's really nice because then I can, at the end of it is basically put all these pieces together and show me what this looks like. And so
these are little React components. Is literally what they are?
Based in React. And then this is kind of my way to like, I can click through almost the entire app.
Right.
And I can show this to the stakeholders and say, hey, what do you guys think? Like, is this useful? Should I move things around?
Do these also assemble the full pages somewhere in here?
Yes. Yep. And so here's like my compliance page, here's my context page. And it's also nice because often with the LLMs, they will, even if you have components, it'll try to rewrite stuff. You'll end up with duplicated code all over the place.
Right.
And by going through and just doing the storybook thing, it's really good about reusing those components because it's all just kind of all in one place. So that's really
interesting.
And then, and then the really nice thing is once you have all these stories in place, you can then go through, basically have all those stories and send that back to the LLM and say, okay, analyze this in code and help me to understand what should my data model look like?
Interesting.
What should that, the API layer look like?
Okay.
And then give me a checklist of those. And so that's basically this next step that I had in here. So I replaced my front end into this, which is it went through and based on that story, it just gave me this data model. And just looking at it, it's like, oh, this is good. This isn't a super complex app. It's a form filling out thing. So this is actually a pretty good thing for this. But I found even for more complex stuff, it does a really good job. And so basically it's going to go through, here's all my models. And then it's going to start to go through and give I use TRPC, which is kind of just using routers and routes and API.
Yeah.
And it just goes through and it just gives me my basic CRUD implementation, just for basics here. And it's just check. And then by in an hour or two, I can just have a fully working, front end, back end, everything's just kind of,
it's super cool. Do you think there's going to be a world where we just live in the BRD, PRD and we delegate everything here to some engine that then maybe also has to look at something else like validations or tests or goals or business outcomes, even something else, but it's something where the machine itself can say, I'm going to go off and do this for you. And maybe it'll take till tomorrow morning, but I'll have you covered.
I do think so. I don't think, I think there's going to be exceptions, right? I think, and I think it's going to take a while. This isn't going to be tomorrow. Engineers still have a lot to do. And I've actually found the more that I use AI and do stuff, there's just like 10 more things that everybody wants me to do.
Sure.
So it could end up there. But I do think what's going to be really interesting is we're just going to keep going up layers of abstraction higher and higher and higher. And we're already seeing it here with using AI to build a lot of these. But what you're going to start to see is like almost like new languages that are going to be really clear building blocks of things that you can use to build. Almost like what I'm doing with Storybook. And then there's going to be abstractions on top of that and on top of that. And I think you're going to get to a point where you're just going to have, really high agency product manager, generalist types being able to build almost anything you want.
Yeah.
And again, that's not a next year prediction. That's a 5-year prediction.
Sure.
But, I think there are certain tasks where you're already seeing it. I think that's kind of what I've been trying to push on here is just to show, look, if you line everything up perfectly, you have the right stack, you have the right job role, you have the right person who's curious and has been doing AI stuff for years in prompt engineering. I should get really far right now. And this stuff is just going to keep getting better and better. And more people are going to be able to do this. So I think it's like prefab housing. We're going to build more houses and they're going to be a little cheaper maybe, but there's still going to be problems with like, oh, this one's on the hill sloped like this and we need to get out a saw and do some. And if you don't have the context of knowing the overall architecture or what's possible with the materials or the tools, you're kind of stuck. You can't just delegate it. You're it's sort of that analogy. What are those areas where you find using this workflow, you are still like, I'm rolling my sleeves and diving in? Yeah.
I got
refactoring. Refactoring for me has been really hard for major, like complicated refactors.
Right.
Surprising. I would have thought AI would be really good at that.
Were refactors easier when you had handwritten the code because you knew the code that you were refactoring and therefore you could sort of plan it out and you find it? Do you ever find, I find that case where I'm refactoring code where I have a lot of code that I wrote myself in my repo. I have a lot of code that it wrote. Yeah. And now when it's touching that code that I didn't write, that's where I'm like, it's showing me, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, for me to validate that's okay.
Yeah.
I need to go spend a few hours to understand it. That's a major friction. Right.
And I find I need to develop my own new disciplines as a developer, which are, I had my own disciplines before, and now I've gotten lazy a lot of times where some of this stuff is just so good. And I just find myself like, just vibe coding away, check.
What's the craziest production vibe code introduced error that you've introduced?
Well, here's one.
Most annoying.
This is so embarrassing. I shouldn't even say this. But I don't know if this is necessarily a vibe code thing as much as an actual cursor bug that they fixed immediately. But the other day, I was building my my CLI tool, my AI coding tool. And as part of that, I was like, oh, I want to actually package this up, put it on NPM. People can install it, run it on their command line. And so I haven't done that in years. And so I was like, okay, let me just ask. And I got some nice, perfect steps of like, here's exactly what you need to do. And very specifically, you need to create this .npm ignore file and make sure your keys don't touch button. Okay. Went through, I was like doing all this stuff, and it was like, all right, we're ready to deploy. You want to deploy it? And in my mind, I'm thinking, I should look through all this stuff. It really should, when it's getting late at night. And I was like, okay, fine. And I hit go. The next thing I know, my email goes off with like 10 different alerts from like open Anthropic, AWS saying, your keys have been exposed and all this.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm such an idiot.
Yeah.
And what had happened was, even though Cursor said it had created that npm ignore, there was a bug where actually, if you start a file with a dot, it wasn't actually applying those changes.
Oh, wow.
And so when I actually opened up that file, even though it showed up there, it was blank. And that's what caused the whole thing. Honestly, even if I hadn't done that, it would have fallen back like, ignore the whole thing. It was so dumb. And I felt like an idiot. And I spent a day undoing a bunch of.
I happen to think that there's a genre of tooling that at least I haven't seen startups yet. Maybe there are some, there probably are, but that's in the realm of testing, like production testing. Like canaries as a service and things that are needed because there's so much more code and no one knows the code. And so you need these like other kind of agentic testing things that also don't know the code, but at least they know what broken and good looks like. And they're there to validate against maybe your PRD. And they kind of run doing their job. I think that's needed. It's analogous to the alert you got. That was one such tool. Right. Actually, we need a lot more like that.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
Do you want to hear my most embarrassing vibe code bug of the last couple of weeks? So this is when I really started going vibe coding. I'm doing a lot of agentic coding. I review everything. I was like, you know what? I trust it. My trust has gone up. So throwing lots more changes in, refactors, ship it. And so I had this, the code was, so the bug was modals stopped working.
Okay.
So modal dialog pop up to gather info or are you sure or whatever. I use those and they just stopped working. So they would pop up and then the entire screen would be half dimmed out and nothing is clickable. Back button, nothing works, just frozen.
Yeah.
Just horrible.
Oh my God.
And even figuring out what happened was Cursor couldn't help me debug it. Cursor terminal couldn't. I had no idea where to even approach this, but it was something to do with Z order and conflicting JavaScript files. The bug turned out to be unrelated to the modals, some other JavaScript that was handling like one of these slick like loading interstitials that, I have a little widget that like I can parameterize with like, if it's the AI thinking it's this thing and put words in there and, sometimes it blurs the background, sometimes it doesn't, just good user experience. Sometimes it's there and it's integrated with this thing that's polling for state and whatever. Somehow that got in conflict with JavaScript and CSS, like unrelated to that somewhere else in a way that was like the changes that the AI had introduced over here as part of some other change that had nothing to do with that. Made this modals not work.
That's brutal.
It was
so hard to test, right? We're gonna find
no. That's what, probably when we think about this test coverage thing was like, that's the kind of thing you wouldn't write a unit test for.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And also it was a thing that was like not super obvious. It was like very important if you're like on a setting screen and clicking edit. And then on that one function, it has a modal. But other than that, you're not going to see it every day. Right. So it's like until a user reports it, then you're just suffering.
Yeah.
It is bad.
Yeah.
I feel like there's going to be a lot more software like that. That's like,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where, my earlier part, like the levels of abstract, I think having, more testable building blocks that you can kind of put together in more standardized ways is going to be more the way that people are going to vibe code in the future. And especially people who don't have an engineering background. And I think if you were to set that up in the right way, you could actually get pretty far.
Yeah.
You may not have the most unique looking software, but then again, hardware software doesn't look that unique anyway.
Yeah. Depending on what you
I
built.
think if it can work, and there's a lot of cases where just for business software and things like that, just having it work and be good enough is going to be really valuable. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
You talked a lot about building the UI. Well, this whole process includes the UI, but it's a very traditional UI. Have you explored different user interfaces for systems now that we have multimodal AI and voice can do a pretty good job? And you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, a little bit. So, one of the things I worked on all last year was my AI coding agent called Jacob.
Yeah.
And one of the things I wanted to do with it, which in hindsight, I probably should have just gone with the standard thing and gone with the chat, but I was really trying to think through what are some different ways that you can interact with an AI that's not a chat.
Yeah.
And being able to visualize things and kind of kick off agents and visualize how agents are working behind the scenes and view all that stuff. So I've been doing some of that. But you do kind of run into this problem where, you're almost introducing too many new things to a user at once. Like AI is already pretty unique for the majority of users. And so if you stray too far off something that they're familiar with, the chat works really well, but I feel like you have to hide a lot of the value that's there. And so trying to think through, like, how can you adjust, chat to make it more adaptive where, you can expose the functions that are available and you can click on buttons, things like that.
Yeah.
Or what I've been trying to do is use another paradigm that people are used to. So like, with Jacob, I was using almost like a Kanban style, like, showing to do and doing and done. And then you can click in and kind of view kind of what's been done. And people are familiar with that, but a little bit different way of interacting with an AI. But yeah, those are kind of some of the things I think about from a UX perspective. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. It'll be interesting to see how that works. I'm really excited about that, actually.
As a developer, and you've worked at Microsoft and big teams with huge organizations. What was the biggest organization you worked within?
I worked for the Developer Platform Evangelism Group, which was probably many thousands of people. But my team was.
So everything you described, the PRD, BRD, the design, these are all separate. Like, may not even meet these people in the course of developing the software. And now, obviously at a studio, it's really fast, but it's gotten even faster with AI.
Yeah.
What are the, like at PSL, like, how is it changing the working relationship between the humans? I'm curious about that.
Yeah. I mean, one thing is, and we're even seeing it with our small team, is a mixing of, I've seen some product people that are writing code.
Yeah.
We have a new product person, and basically they're doing this experiment to see, can they write and build an entire startup in 30 days just by themselves, including writing the code. And it's somebody who, coded a little bit and has some background, but not a professional coder.
Yeah.
And we're just seeing how far they can get with that. Or one of our designers.
You're doing it as an experiment. You're saying, let's try it.
Yeah, let's try it. And I've been doing a lot more on the design side. Usually we partner with the designer, and I've been doing a lot more of, using things like actually I have it up on my screen, which is one of my favorite tricks is using this approach of like, we're calling rubrics. And so basically what you do is, and you can do this with a lot of different things, but I've been doing this with design is basically saying, not just, hey, AI, make my design better, but saying, hey, here's a rubric that explains what a good design looks like. And here's, and it's kind of hard to see because it's Markdown, but basically saying, here are some categories to think of for design. And then here's what an ape design looks like. Here's what a bee looks like, all the way down to here's what bad design looks like. And I basically say, especially with the thinking models, look at this component and give me a really good design for this.
Wow. Does this work?
Hard until you can get an A. It does work. Surprisingly works. And it works for a lot of different things. This rubric approach, we've been using a lot of PSL. It's kind of our secret sauce for some of our new things. But
really, that's really cool.
It's been a really good way to take a reasoning model that's, really good at math and coding and get it to do things like like
I
design.
love it. I love how deep you are
into
into this, into like a methodical approach to using the thinking models, right? Thinking models aren't that old, right? We haven't had a lot of time to play with them, and you're really pressing them to get repeatable utility out of them for different domains. That's impressive. I mean, I've done the spaghetti throw up against the wall version of this is I'll take a page that I'm not happy with how it looks, but I'm not a designer.
Right.
And I'll just throw it in. I'll literally copy and paste the entire HAML, or if I'm in Ruby or whatever, or the raw HTML output even. I'll just say, hey, go redesign that. Make it look awesome. Make it look better. Make it simpler.
It
does a half decent job, actually.
That totally works.
Do you feel like with the rubric and that it's able to follow these nuances and actually focus on color palette or layout and grid and actually in a nuanced way affect?
I think
like
so.
If you took this and if I took this right now to one of my pages and I said, I want color and layout and fonts to be A, but make layout an F, would it actually do that?
That's a good question.
You know what I mean? Like,
we've been playing with some of those of going back and forth of like saying, only focus on these categories and not these categories. It does. I feel like it will try to be. It tries to be the A across the board because it's trying to like please the.
It's always right.
But it does work, and this is something we've been exploring, and I think more people could explore it
because that would be super useful. The selective attention to specifics while ignoring others would be really good in the sense of like software change management and risk of new bugs, right? I do not want you to change the interaction model at all. I just want you to restyle things.
Yes, exactly.
Right. It's reskin, but please don't, make my modals not work anymore. Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And to give you a specific example, so this is a project I worked on last week, I think. Basically, it was just showing an example of how to build something from scratch and focus on. This was an Electron app, and I was building it out. And basically, this is a tool. I'm call it Paste Max. I've got it open here. It's basically a tool that I use. It's there's a lot of different versions of this, but basically, you can go out and select a folder, and then you can just copy all of your files in there, so you can paste it into an LLM.
Okay.
And
this is your tool.
This is my tool. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Open source. You can check it out. And I was building it, and it looked terrible. It looked awful. It was just junky. And it was, and what I said was, okay, don't just focus on the design. Actually, focus on the UX first. Just do black and white. No colors.
Cool.
And then follow this route. And so, even though this has color right here, but basically don't ignore the color, but just work on these things, the layout and the typography and the spacing. And it came out with this thing. And honestly, like I looked at it, I'm like, it's actually quite good. This is 100% better than what it was before.
Right.
But for a tool like this, it's actually a pretty nice UX for this. And of course, you could add another step and do more of a color. But honestly, I was like,
incredible.
I'm gonna do this like linear kind of like simple kind of thing. But it's got the right level of interaction, the right level of things here, and the call to act, like it just felt good to me. And to go from terrible to this, basically one shot it using that rubric, it was like, oh, this is actually really powerful. It's a really kind of cool way to do that. So
cool. That's fascinating. Do you I've heard and anecdotally I've experienced that Claude 3.7 is better at visual design, iterations, right? You've experienced that too.
Yeah. I'll go as far as say every other model is terrible at it. Summit is really good.
Really?
Starting with 3.5, it's really good than everybody else.
Are you aware of anyone who's attempting to specifically focus on design iterations with generative AI for UI in the form of like either leaning into multimodal or have fine-tuned something or?
That's a really good question. I haven't. And it's surprising.
Yeah.
And it's something that I would love to play with because so much of, we do a lot of design work at PSL.
I think this is a great startup idea in that space. Somebody's got to be working on that.
Right.
And it's a perfect component of any of the coding tools to have that element.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I've seen some interesting stuff around AI and design, but it's much more about like leveraging colors and kind of auto-generating things and being able to play with it.
Yeah.
From almost like a Figma, but for AI kind of thing, not from a model.
Sure. We haven't talked about agents. So have you built any, like the coding agents were sort of agents, I guess. Yeah, that was definitely an agent. That was a very early agent actually.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So I started with Jacob. This is probably a year and a half ago. And of course, back then we didn't have the models. The model support wasn't good enough to run a real agentic work.
Yeah.
And people were trying, and it was just kind of a mess. And
Yeah.
I kept, so every like 3 months, I would like rewrite Jacob to be from kind of a step-by-step workflow kind of thing to a much more agentic tool use thing.
Yeah.
And I found that it was much worse, and then I ditch it.
Yeah.
3 months later, I tried again, and it was
Sure.
like a little bit better, but not good.
Did it switch over at some point?
Did. And I think it was Sonnet 3.5 was really kind of the tipping point. And me personally, by then I had been burned enough with it to say, agents are overhyped. This isn't working. It's going to be a year or two before it's ready. But no, 3.5 was there. And that's where I think Cursor really, if you look at their trajectory.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Especially with the agent stuff that they got.
Have you since built any agents for your own workflows or own productivity or just for fun?
Yeah. So I've been working, actually this past week, I've been working on just a little CLI agent that's mostly just been a educational project for me. So this is my,
interesting, cool.
My, what I'm calling fork, just, every,
I like the name.
Forks BS code. But basically, I basically set up a REPL, and it just calls these tools. And so, I've just got a handful of different tools that do different things.
First of all, are you using any frameworks, or are you hand coding your?
I'm hand coding this. Yep. And generally I haven't been using frameworks. But like, here's an example of my bash tool, right? And this is like,
cool.
Pretty straightforward, but it's got some nice things like, hey, don't do RMRF. All this stuff. It's got some login and things like that.
Yeah, cool.
And then it just sends it all to the AI. In this case, we're using Sonnet 3.7.
Okay. Where's your registry where you tell it that these tools exist?
It's in my system prompt, which is somewhere here.
So just somewhere you've said, here are the tools and their interfaces.
So basically, the system prompt kind of says, actually, this doesn't have the tools themselves. It says to kind of use tools, but then the tools are basically generated. I want to say it's here. The tools kind of have so we got permissions, but it's basically kind of building these up from some parameters. I forget exactly where it is. Maybe it's here.
Oh, cool.
This is just the type. But anyway, it's kind of got some basics around, here it is. Sorry. So at the top of each file. So it says, what the name is, very detailed description, and then just your schema for what's going in, what's required.
Cool.
And then, what happens when you go and execute it. And you just keep doing this for every single one of these.
Yep.
And what's really nice is, for a coding tool, it's actually not that complicated. You get 15, 20 tools in there. Sure. When you're a coding agent, you're either writing a thing or editing it.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of stuff to kind of figure out context.
Sure.
And so, it's kind of a nice learning exercise. That's part of the series I've been doing is more just kind of walking through how are tools made? What does the tool called look like? And basically just trying to show like, this isn't that hard. Like there's some patterns here, but
that's cool.
End of the day, the AI is doing all the lifting. The model's doing the lifting. You're just kind of providing.
That's right. Have you needed observability, like when stuff goes wrong and you need to rerun a piece of it or understand what happened to get there?
Yeah.
Have you solved that on your own, or using a tool, or are you just winging it?
I haven't done a great job of that. In this tool, I have a series of different logs, so I can basically see, here's all my actions that were created and when it was done.
You have a way to get at it, at least.
Some basic analytics, and then just tracking the conversation. This is just kind of my own local debugging kind of thing. I personally I've been using Portkey a little bit, which is a nice service that allows you to kind of run different models, swap them in and out very easily, and then just get some tracing there. But this is an area where, especially since a lot of the stuff I'm doing is so early stage, it's moving so quickly that generally by the time you put in any kind of really detailed testing or observability, things have changed so much that you got to just undo everything. So we tend to just kind of get things as set as possible. And then when the CTO comes on board, the ones who kind of implement that, the tools that they prefer. So
I see. That makes total sense.
Have you used something? What do you use? Do you have any preferences there?
No, I'm winging it.
Yeah,
pretty much. And I don't use frameworks either. I use frameworks. I use frameworks to learn. I read the docs. I read the frameworks. I read the sample apps. Sometimes I run them, but I typically discover that unless I'm getting to some hard problem like, oh yeah, I'm not going to implement my own database.
Yeah.
I'm not going to,
Right.
The choices are like not implement that, but whether I use like a PG vector or a dedicated thing, choices like that. I spend a lot of time and I test and I talk to people, but those are the only times where I'm ever thinking, do I just use something that someone else has created? Otherwise I'd create it myself.
Same thing. Yeah. Semantic search is a big one for me. I'm like, do I hand code this? But I've actually found a lot of this stuff is when you start working on it, it's actually pretty straightforward compared to what I thought at the beginning. So
part of it's I do have a lot of code in production, powering T-Curves and stuff. And I get startups all the time, but I don't want to tool up into something. And honestly, like they fail to raise money, I've got to rip it out. And then I don't want to have that weekend where I'm like, sorry, honey, I've got to do this thing or the whole site goes down.
Machine died.
Whatever. Exactly. The other reason is because honestly, so many of these conversations, people are very complimentary on camera, and off camera, they're like, actually, and I think the state of the community is people are sort of DIYing it at this point, except for when it comes to like, I do see people adopting the observability platforms. Obviously, some of the serverless stuff is really interesting. If you look at Neon to scale your databases, like, I think there's just a cost trade-off, it's a good decision. It's, you got to be aware of the cost.
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't think it's a build versus buy decision, if you will.
Interesting.
Fun stuff. What are some of the coolest, interesting things you've seen others do with agents, in the community?
Let me think.
Or others in the office,
Yeah. I mean, my favorite thing right now is, agent wise is honestly deep research. That's been the one tool that I've found is like.
Did you go to the last AI Tinkers?
I didn't. I missed that one.
Bilal had the open deep research.
Open, yeah. I know Bilal. I saw what he did.
Yeah. I love the fact that like something really profound could come out. There'll be an open source version in 2 days.
Right.
And it might not be as good, but it's open. We can build upon it. And I love it when it's somebody I know from the community sitting, at our meetup the next day. So,
I've started like a handful of open manus,
that's really fun.
Different things and looking at that.
The deep research, really all of them now on all of the platforms. I use them all. What I'll do sometimes is like kick off 3 at once. I'll do like a Grok, OpenAI, and a Gemini. Just because why not?
Yeah, exactly.
If I'm gonna have to wait 7 minutes, I might as well see 3. Have you developed an intuition for like, you're going through these workflows and being methodical as you are. Mm-hmm. Have you developed an intuition for like which of those tools is better for which kind of, or even just reasoning models? I'm still curious for reasoning problems. What types of reasoning problems are better on, like a Gemini thinking versus a 3.7 thinking or a 1?
From my experience, and some of it is just based on inertia and what I've been using, and when I find something that works really well, I tend to use it. So like I haven't even tried out Grok more than just like a handful of queries. But I find that O1 Pro, even though it's expensive, has been pretty far and away my favorite reasoning model. And even better, using deep research to do a non-researchy task, but to actually just do a reasoning task is very good as well. I think that's whatever their next gen model is.
Are you paying the $200 a month?
Yes. Well, PSL is playing. Thank you, PSL. I probably wouldn't pay it, honestly, if it was me personally. I think it's really good, but we've seen so many good things, and O3 Mini is also really good. That being said, too, I've been more and more a fan of Gemini.
Me too.
I've been leaning in towards the AI Studio. I find myself going and using the thinking. I still think it's a step below O1 Pro, but there are a lot of use cases. That cost to value ratio is just so good. And especially, Flashlight, I ran 70,000 records through over the weekend, and it cost me $2.60. Man, there's some really good use cases for that model. So that's been good. And then Sonnet, I find for design, coding,
I was sharing
for agentic kind of stuff.
I was sharing when Killian, when you walked in here, you heard me tell that story about one-shotting image analysis with like, is it an image or a photo, a graphic or a logo? Does it have words or not? Transcribe the words. What are the dominant colors? Short transcription, large transcription, like subject list. One shot getting all of that from a single image times 32,000 images for 72 cents with Gemini.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I like how actually they have really good differentiation with the models of the light for just super cheap and fast.
Yeah.
And then the regular that's like
Yeah.
a really reasonable cost option. And the thinking is really smart and good.
Yeah.
And that
It is.
context window, the 2 million
Yeah.
code for a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
I've been using it for like transcription.
Oh yeah.
Upload a video. I've lately just been like recording a lot of videos with
Yeah.
business. You know, the first thing that's like, instead of me taking a list of changes to make to a product,
Yeah.
I upload it. I get the
only
whole
problem I've had, because I love it, it does diarization.
Yes.
Not only
right.
that, but you can give it a video and say, not only diarize it, but
Yep.
also figure out the person's names from the conversation, and it'll do a great
I
job.
showed somebody, they're like, how did
And-
you? It's
And
like,
put it
grab
in,
it from this.
and I want this exact format, or follow the one from Hollywood Scripts, you know, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And it does it all in one shot.
Yeah.
But the only problem I've had is that it won't do, because you're output limited. It's 2 million input tokens, but you're output limited. So if you have an hour long video, you can't do it.
Right.
So how do you overcome that?
I've been doing short videos, so I haven't had to worry about that.
Yeah.
But that is one of the limitations. It's surprising.
Yeah.
Is it 8,000? It's like 8.
It's pretty small.
It's
Yeah.
shocking.
Yeah. So if you were actually transcribing an hour long video, you'd have to either like use FFmpeg to break it up and like write a script and put it on. It'd be a pain. I use DeepGram for that, just so.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I've done, if I know it's going to be long, is I'll say, do the first half and then wait for me to say continue, and then it'll like break it down. But that's kind of.
Yeah. It feels, janky. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Have you used other things like the caching, Gemini caching, or from one of the other vendors?
Yeah. A little bit. I like, what is it? Is it OpenAI that does it automatically? Is really nice.
Yeah.
I implemented caching with Sonnet 3.5 for Jacob, my coding agent.
Mhm.
Because for that back and forth, like it's just, you save so much
Oh, interesting.
with that. Google's is actually really hard to use. So I haven't done it with Gemini, but if I were to roll out a production thing, I would.
You have to kind of manage it.
Yeah.
And
it's like an hour, you got to there's a cache thing.
Yeah. And if you don't manage it, it may not be worth it. Like cost wise. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Another is, they have code execution. Did you know this? Most people don't.
Yes. Yeah.
A full sandbox, generate and run the code, not just generate it. Run it. Give me the results. That's pretty cool.
That is cool.
Of course, grounding. Have you played with that?
I've played with grounding. I've actually found, though, I've seen hallucinations with it pretty regularly.
Oh, really? Like what? Like what example?
So one thing I've been using it for is competitive analysis. So we have a tool where we like start an idea and a bunch of, it's like, oh, we'll go do competitive analysis. And so I've been using Perplexity. I've been using Gemini with grounding. And I'll find myself going through and spot checking, and pretty quickly it's making stuff up. I've actually, it's found it's better than some, actually Perplexity, and they've changed it recently. So I've just tested the new thing, but better than like the old Sonar thing that Perplexity had, but still not perfect.
Is Perplexity just built on like Bing, or did they have their own index?
I think they were using a version of Llama, and then they fine-tuned R1. They have an R1 thing, and then they were using, I forget what their latest thing is based on.
But for the web results.
Oh, the web results. I actually don't know. I want to say I actually don't know. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then it's funny that Google would hallucinate search results, like the one job you guys have.
I was so shocked. I was so disappointed too, because I thought, like, once I saw they had the grounding available and it went up GA.
You saw today OpenAI, I know this video will come out later, but today the OpenAI dropped their search API.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting.
Very excited about that.
Curious to see what you think of it versus your other experiment.
Yeah, it's on my list to try out. Yep.
Very cool. There's always something new to try. How do you keep up with everything?
Honestly, I spend a lot of time.
Yeah, it's fun.
I generally, I'll go on, X or Twitter. It's like, I've got a handful of people I follow that I trust. And when I see that I've got like 5 people I trust saying, you got to try this thing, I'll try the thing. Also at PSL, we have, a handful of engineers who are very deep in this, and we have a Slack channel. So we share there.
Yeah, cool.
Which is really good. And then, a lot of it is just like, me not sleeping well and waking up at 4 a.m. and being like, oh, let's scroll AI.
Have you played with images and video, voice, any of those others? Yeah,
I voice a little bit. I really like the modality of voice in, text out. And so I actually have a component that I built. It's actually in my next starter kit, which is basically a speech to text area. So it's text area with a little speech in, and it uses Grok, G-R-O-Q, and using a distilled whisper on there. So super fast, super cheap, and is really high quality. So I think that's good. I use Super Whisper all the time on my laptop when I'm at home and not at the office. in my open office space.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, in terms of like, I love image generation. I'm a subscriber to the Midjourney magazine of all things.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I love sitting with my 5-year-old
Cool.
through the images. But I've been following Midjourney and actually was thinking about doing a AI image startup like to 2022, back when some of that early stuff was out. We've been playing with it at PSL since like back in like 2017 when we had the NVIDIA, I forget what it was called, but really, really early models of being able to tune diffusion models and things like that. So it's been an area of interest, and I think it's just more for fun. We haven't been using it for work, but
sure. Yeah, fun. Cool. Is there anywhere that people can go to check out your work or your videos?
Yeah, so I've got a YouTube channel. You can search for Kevin Leneway. I actually don't even know the name of the channel, but also a bunch of my repositories are up. You can just go to GitHub/KLeneway, and I've got a handful of things. My next starter, I think, is a really useful template. It's got some of my prompts and things in there, and then as I build new things, I'll generally just throw them up here and just let people play with them. Most of my stuff's just MIT. Like pretty
cool.
Doing this for fun to teach people, and
yeah,
it's really kind of
super cool. Thanks for sharing. It was great to have you.